As it's now a goal to review as many amusement parks that I've been to as possible, there's a place I want to talk about that is the only defunct amusement park I've visited. And because what happened to it is so recent, I figured I might as well make this video now before all of my fellow enthusiasts forget what it even was. Conneaut Lake Park is a small amusement park that currently sits dormant in Conneaut Lake, Pennsylvania, USA. Today, most of its signature attractions have been removed, so all that remains are a couple of family rides, and the future for almost all of them is unknown. But how did the park get to the point it is today, and how did I discover this amusement park? Well, you see, I had never heard much about this place before my visit in 2019. We were in the middle of our first road trip meant entirely for the purpose of theme parks. This included first visits to Cedar Point, Kennywood, Canada's Wonderland, Waldameer, and one small park just an hour away from our home base in Erie, Pennsylvania. I remember scrolling through the roller coaster database one day and discovering this ancient wooden coaster called Blue Streak. The coaster nerd within me became quite intrigued, so we set off to visit this park on a Tuesday afternoon in the summer. Now, what we didn't realize is that we'd be visiting for what would be their last year of total operation. It was apparent when we got there that the park was in rough condition. All of the buildings looked run down, benches and tables were falling apart, asphalt was everywhere, and all the paint you'd see was chipped. That said, we kept our head on the prize, which was getting on their 1938 wood coaster Blue Streak. This ride was built by the National Amusement Device Company and ran their iconic Century Flyer trains that you can find on rides like Thunderbolt at Kennywood. Unfortunately, Blue Streak tracked a fraction as well as Thunderbolt does. Dare I say it might have been the roughest coaster I've ridden to this date. Yes, more so than Wildcat at Lake Compounds and whatever else you might think up in your head. That said, the layout was a charming out and back experience through the woods and it had so much potential. If only the ride got proper maintenance, I could only imagine how much better it could have been. What can I say though, I was just glad to have gotten the coaster credit. They also had two other roller coasters and both of these are actually still sitting there. One of them is barely a roller coaster credit and is more of a ghost train dark ride. This is called Devil's Den. Back when I rode Devil's Den, it was featured on the roller coaster database, but eventually it was taken off as it was simply too divisive. It is still an option on coaster count though, so I've kept it in my credit list to this day. In all fairness, it's got a lift hill and a small drop, so I think it would definitely be fair to consider it a coaster. If not, I still enjoyed riding it as its dark red elements were so jarring almost to the point where it might have been the best thing I rode at the park. Also, something weird is it's got a gum wall as you go up the lift hill, and I guess it's been a tradition to place your gum there for decades. Lastly, of the three, they do have an Alan Herschel kiddie coaster that you unfortunately cannot ride without a child. I don't know if rules have changed since last year when the park operated with like 4 rides under new management, but that's what it was like when I visited. Speaking of management, let's talk about the downfall of this amusement park. Conneaut Lake Park actually dates way back to 1892, so it's a very old park. One of the oldest in the country, in fact. They opened Blue Streak in 1938, and that's always been the park's signature attraction. Over time, this park suffered lots of financial difficulties. In the 1990s, the owners went into debt and attendance was declining, so things never looked good. A proposal was actually made to close all the rides and replace them with a small family entertainment center, but locals weren't happy about it. One of these said locals, who doubled as a businessman, decided to step up and purchase the park to keep its historical essence in place. That said, he was in no shape to operate an amusement park, which is quite the expensive task. That's why Conneaut Lake Park was forced into bankruptcy. A few years later, this other company purchased the park and was able to open everything with the exception of Blue Streak. Now, if you ask any of the locals, they will tell you that Conneaut Lake Park without Blue Streak just isn't the same. It was said that a $100,000 refurbishment was needed to operate the coaster again, and at the time, the owners didn't have that type of money, not to mention that attendance was still quite low. Through 2007, the park continued to operate without Blue Streak until they just couldn't hold on any longer and dropped the park abandoned once more. There seemed to be this huge realization that if Conneaut Lake Park came back, they could not operate without Blue Streak, as that's what pulled in so many crowds. Luckily, a miracle happened a few months later when a group dedicated to refurbishing the coaster was given a $50,000 grant, while the rest of the $50,000 needed were donated over time. This meant that they were capable of bringing back the ride in hope that it would be enough to bring back visitors. Blue Streak reopened soon after and continued to operate until 2019, the last year before the COVID-19 pandemic. If rocky attendance levels weren't enough, COVID would be the last nail in the coffin for Conneaut Lake Park. After the park announced that they were putting Conneaut Lake Park up for sale one last time, they actually did find a buyer named Todd Josephs. That said, it wasn't until after acquiring the park that he unveiled his plans to demolish it to make way for a concert venue. This angered fans and locals, as in every statement he came out with, he seemed to ignorantly disregard the park's ancient past and long history. Because the outcry was impossible to ignore, he promised to hire a team of engineers to inspect Blue Streak of its current conditions and determine whether or not the ride was salvageable. That said, many were skeptical that he would put any sort of effort into doing so, and as expected, he kept silent on the matter. A couple months later, Todd Joseph's employees were spotted tearing sections of the ride down, most likely without a permit allowing them to do so. As they burned sections of dismantled wood, the fire was spread to other parts of the ride, and according to Todd Josephs, this was all a total accident. Whatever the case, Blue Streak was so damaged that his employees were actually given a permit just to scrap what was left. Many believe that this was their strategy of demolishing the ride all along. Now, I can't comment on what actually ended up happening, but what I do know is that the park was a shell of what it once was in its last year of operation last season. Without Blue Streak, again, Conneaut Lake Park just does not work. At this point in time, Conneaut Lake Park isn't exactly a park and is being treated more as a carnival for select weeks in July. That means that technically you should still be able to ride Devil's Den and whatever else they have left there, but I can't confirm as I don't know what they've done to this place over the off season. All I know is that the way this park went out was so sad. All of the ups and downs throughout history were ultimately met with the demise by a man who simply didn't understand the presence of this park. Now sure, it was probably one of the weakest and worst parks I'd ever been to, but that never means it's worth closing over. Instead, a dull amusement park should be treated in a way where it can be improved because of its opportunity and potential. It's sad to see that this never ended up happening with this place, especially seeing as it's one of the country's oldest existing amusement parks. The last thing I'll mention is I know this video is more of a history lesson than a review, and that's simply because I personally don't have too much to say about this place. From my experience, the park was probably a 2 out of 10 if I'm being honest, as the only saving grace were the fun employees and a handful of mediocre rides. I'd be very curious if any of you got to visit in its heyday, because if you did, be sure to share your stories of Conneaut Lake Park down in the comments. I'd like to invite you all to like this video and subscribe, as that's all I have for you in today's video. Rest in peace, Conneaut Lake Park. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye guys.